The Spanish Civil War The Republic on the Edge, 1931 to 1936. It began not with bullets, but with ballots. In April 1931, after years of unrest and deep dissatisfaction with the monarchy, the Spanish people voted overwhelmingly to end centuries of royal rule. King Alfonso XIII fled, and a bold new era was born, the Second Spanish Republic. For the first time, Spain would attempt democracy, but dreams of progress quickly met the harsh weight of reality. The Republic promised land reform, women's rights, secular education, and freedom from the grip of the Catholic Church. For many, workers, intellectuals, women, it was a long-awaited revolution. But for others, landowners, the clergy, the military elite, it felt like the world was slipping away. Spain was dividing, not north and south, but soul against soul. Tensions boiled in the streets, strikes, protests, church burnings. The air crackled with fury. One election after another swung the pendulum wildly between liberal and conservative, each side undoing the other's work. Trust evaporated, extremism flourished, and while politicians debated in parliament, men with rifles began to organize quietly in the shadows. Because for some, democracy wasn't the solution, it was the enemy. The coup that lit the match, July 1936. By the summer of 1936, Spain was a country balancing on a razor's edge. And then, on the night of July 17th, it slipped. A group of right-wing military officers, led by General Emilio Mola and the cold, calculating Francisco Franco, launched a coup d'etat. Their plan? Seize control of Spain in a matter of days. But the country didn't roll over. Instead, it exploded. The coup split the nation in two. Half the army joined the rebels, half remained loyal to the Republic. Cities were divided street by street. Republican militias, made up of workers, students, even poets, grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Spain was no longer on the verge of war. It was in one. But this wasn't an ordinary war. There were no clear fronts, no simple uniforms. Civilians were now soldiers, and in some towns, a man's life could depend on whether he carried a Bible or a Union card. Across the country, ancient grudges awakened. Churches were burned, priests were shot, so were school teachers. In both Republican and nationalist zones, justice vanished. In its place, fear, vengeance, and the terrible belief that only one side could survive. Spain, in just a few days, had become a battlefield of ideology, and the world was watching. A global rehearsal for World War, this was no longer just Spain's war. Before the dust had even settled from the failed coup, foreign flags were flying over Spanish soil. Not openly, but unmistakably. Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy moved quickly. Hitler saw Spain as a perfect testing ground for his growing war machine. Mussolini saw a chance to expand his influence across the Mediterranean. Planes, tanks, bombs, all flowed into Franco's hand. The skies over Spain became a proving ground for the Luftwaffe, where cities like Guernica would be erased not for strategy, but for spectacle. And on the other side, a patchwork of passion and desperation. The Soviet Union, uneasy but eager to stop fascism's advance, sent weapons and advisors to the Republic. But more powerful than Stalin's guns were the volunteers. Over 35,000 idealists, students, dock workers, writers from America, Britain, France, and beyond poured into Spain to fight in the International Brigade. They had no orders, no promise of pay, just one shared belief. Fascism had to be stopped here, or it would spread everywhere. Spain was no longer a civil war. It was a dress rehearsal for something much bigger and much darker. As foreign bombs fell on Spanish towns, the world held its breath. But it wouldn't hold it for long. Guernica, the day the sky fell. It was a quiet Monday in Guernica, a market day. Families were out, children played in the streets, farmers sold vegetables, and then, at 4:30 p.m., the sky began to scream. German bombers flying in formation descended like vultures. For over 3 hours, they rained fire on the town. Explosives, incendiaries. The streets became rivers of flame. Churches, homes, livestock, nothing was spared. Civilians ran, but there was nowhere to go. Even the countryside was bombed to trap the fleeing. By sunset, Guernica was rubble. Over 1,600 civilians were dead or dying. This wasn't a battle. It was a message, a brutal experiment. Hitler and Franco wanted to see just how much destruction air power alone could deliver, and how terror could be weaponized. But Guernica's ashes spoke louder than bombs. One man, Pablo Picasso, took the horror and turned it into one of the most searing anti-war images in history. His painting Guernica, a cry frozen in oil and canvas, showing twisted bodies, screaming horses, and broken mother, a symbol of what fascism really looked like. Guernica wasn't just a tragedy, it was a warning, and the world, for the most part, ignored it. A war of shadows, propaganda, spies, and betrayals. This wasn't just a war of guns and bombs, it was a war of truth and lies, of whispers in dark corners and posters on bright walls. Both sides knew the battlefield extended beyond trenches. Propaganda became a weapon. In Republican Spain, murals called the people to rise, to resist fascism, to die if needed, for freedom. But inside the posters' colorful slogans was a grim irony. The Republic was fracturing from within. Communists, anarchists, socialists, once united, now suspicious of one another. Accusations flew, betrayals festered. Stalin's agents hunted fellow leftists they saw as threats, imprisoning, even executing, those who dared to disagree. Meanwhile, Franco's nationalists controlled the narrative with brutal efficiency. Their radio broadcasts promised order and tradition. Their priests blessed the war as holy. Dissenters vanished in the night, their names whispered, then erased. Foreign journalists tried to pierce the fog. Some, like George Orwell, came to fight and found not just bullets, but betrayal. Others, like Ernest Hemingway, watched the soul of Spain being torn apart, not just by fascism, but by the very people trying to stop it. This was a civil war, yes, but also a civil unraveling. Spain was bleeding from the outside and the inside. Franco's rise and the Republic's fall, 1938 to 1939. By 1938, the outcome was becoming clear. Franco was no longer just a general. He was a symbol of iron discipline, brutal certainty, and ruthless victory. While the Republic's allies had dwindled, Franco's backing only grew stronger. Nazi Germany supplied bombers. Fascist Italy sent troops. His military crushed Republican strongholds town by town, village by village. Barcelona fell in early 1939. Not just a defeat, but a heartbreak. Madrid, the capital, held out in desperation, but food was gone. Hope, too. And still, the Republic refused to surrender. In the end, it wasn't a final battle that broke them. It was exhaustion. The world had turned its back. Britain and France watched silently, terrified of provoking Hitler. The US stayed neutral, and the Republic, abandoned and broken, collapsed. On April 1st, 1939, Franco declared victory. The war was over. But for Spain, the nightmare was only beginning. Aftermath: a dictator's Spain, 1939 and beyond. Spain was silent, but not at peace. After Franco's victory, a dark curtain fell over the country. He called it reunification. In truth, it was repression. Prisons filled with former Republicans, thousands were executed, thousands more fled into exile. Poets, professors, nurses, soldiers, leaving behind a nation that no longer felt like home. The vibrant culture of the Second Republic, the free press, women's rights, education, was erased overnight. Franco's regime aligned itself with Catholicism, censorship, and an iron grip over daily life. Spain became frozen in time, a 20th century country ruled by 15th century fear. The scars of the war were everywhere, yet no one was allowed to speak of them. Families whispered of loved ones lost, streets bore no plaques, mass graves lay hidden. The memory of a divided nation was buried, but never forgotten. And Franco? He ruled for 36 more years, until his death in 1975. Spain would eventually find its way back to democracy. Legacy: what Spain never forgot. The Spanish Civil War wasn't just a fight between left and right. It was a mirror, reflecting the fears, hopes, and hatreds of a generation. It was the first battlefield where fascism and democracy clashed, where foreign powers rehearsed for a much greater war, where ordinary people, poets, farmers, nurses, teachers, took up arms for what they believed in and paid the price. Spain buried its past for decades, but memory has a way of resurfacing. Today, the war still shapes political debates. Families still search for the bones of loved ones. Streets are still renamed. Statues still fall. Because the Spanish Civil War wasn't just history, it was a warning, a lesson about how fragile democracy can be, and how silence can let wounds fester. At its heart, it's a story not just about Spain, but about us all. Outro, where history speaks. History doesn't whisper, it echoes, across generations, across headlines, across choices we make today. The Spanish Civil War was more than just Spain's tragedy. It was a global warning siren about extremism, about silence, about forgetting. If this story moved you, imagine how many more stories lie buried in time. Unheard, unfelt, untold. This is Era Hive, where history speaks. Like this video, subscribe for more untold chapters of our world, and ring the bell so you never miss the moments that shaped us. Until next time, remember, the past is never just the past.